Hey everyone, Happy New Year! In this first project video of 2020, I'm going to show you how to knit this Picot-Edged Crescent Shawl or Boomerang Shawl. These types of shawls are sometimes also called Step-It-Up shawls, and it's because they form this beautiful crescent shape, or some may call it a boomerang shape, where the shawl actually starts off at, you start knitting it at this narrow edge, and then it keeps increasing in size all the way through to where it ends at the end, and again it ends on a point. And so it has a wonderful wrap to it. It's fairly simple to knit up. I would put this at an advanced beginner level. For the most part, it's pretty much all garter stitch, all knit, except for some of this picot edge thing that we're doing, and this edging that we're doing at this end of the shawl. And so the width of the shawl is about 80 inches, and I've provided the details for the pattern as well as the yarn to be used. Now there's a few different patterns for crescent shaped shawls out there that you can find. So my variation is that the one with this picot edge, and I think it looks really pretty to have this picot edge on the side. And I used one whole ball of this Caron Big Cakes yarn. It's a 10.5 ounce 100% acrylic yarn. It's fairly soft even though it's 100% acrylic, and I think it doesn't feel as crunchy. It actually wraps around really nice, feels soft, and it is machine washable. And one skein should be enough to knit this up. If you want to knit it longer, then you need more than one of these skeins here. Now for this project, you'll also need size 10 circular knitting needles, at least 36 inches in length. The reason is because your shawl keeps growing, the number of stitches keep growing, so you're going to need at least 36 inches. 36 or larger is fine. For this demonstration, I think I only have about 29 inches here. And you'll also need a tape measure to measure your final work, and a tapestry needle, and then a stitch marker also helps. You don't have to have a stitch marker, you could use a safety pin, and that should work too, and of course a pair of scissors. So I provided all the details in the description field, and I actually have some leftover yarn of this particular colorway, which is Cranberry Crisp. So I'm going to actually use the same one to show you in the demonstration, so you can see exactly how it starts to develop and feel. Well, maybe not feel through the video, but you'll get to see how the stitches look with this size needle. Now, just a quick note, the pattern pretty much repeats on each section. It's just that the number of stitches change. And so once you know how to knit up the first section, the second section, it's pretty much the same thing repeated all the way through. And like I said, just the number of stitches change. So I'm going to show you at least the first section through the second section, and then you should be able to follow it the rest of the way. Okay, so it starts off really simple. Leave about a 4 to 6 inch tail, and just a little bit more, maybe a couple inches more, because we only need to cast on 3 stitches. And I'm doing the long tail cast on method here. You can choose any method of your choosing to cast on the 3 stitches, and that's it. Now you are going to repeat 2 rows until you have 12 stitches on this needle. And so the first row, you're going to knit the first 2 stitches, and then we're going to do a yarn over. So we're going to take the yarn, bring it to the front, and then we're going to knit whatever stitches are left on the left needle. In this case, there's only 1 stitch, so we're going to knit that stitch. Now this is row 1, and this is the right side row. Okay, row 2 is the wrong side row, and in row 2 we're going to keep knitting all the way to the last 2 stitches. Now in this case, there's only 4 stitches on the needle, so we're going to knit the first 2 stitches. Now we've come to the last 2 stitches, we're going to do a yarn over. So bring the yarn to the front and knit the last 2 stitches. Alright, so that was row 2, and now we've already increased 2 stitches because we did a yarn over in that first row, we did a yarn over in the second row, so we're up to 5 stitches. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take my stitch marker and I'm going to stick it on here. So I know now I'm back to the right side, so I'm just going to stick it on this side to mark the right side. I think that should be good, so that I know that this is the right side. Pretty soon, once you've knit up enough, you'll know which one is the right side, but at least initially I think it helps to know. All right, so we're going to keep doing this pattern. So on the right side, we're going to knit the first 2 stitches, bring the yarn over, and then just knit all the remaining stitches. And on the wrong side, we're going to knit all the way to the last 2 stitches. Bring the yarn over and then knit the last 2 stitches. All right, so I'm at 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. I'm going to keep doing this till I have 12 stitches on the needle. So I'll speed up through this section and we'll stop when I've got 12 stitches on the needle. So now I've just completed a right side row and I'm at 12 stitches. And if I count them, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, right? And now at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to bind off some of these stitches and then just leave some stitches on the needle. And so what's happening here, let me show you in the work, is that we're essentially at this point here. We've knit till here, and now we're going to bind off some of the stitches in this picot edge, and then we'll continue on. So what you want to do is you want to be facing a wrong side, and you will be facing a wrong side once you have the desired number of stitches here, which is 12 right now. We're facing the wrong side, and we're going to bind off the first 6 stitches, but we're going to bind them off doing a picot bind off. So let me show you how that's done. Now to do a picot bind off, what we're doing is, it's just pretty much similar to a regular bind off, but before binding off each stitch, we're adding a few stitches to it and doing something to help create this sort of little nub, this little picot. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to cast on 2 stitches. So cast on the 2 stitches using the knitted cast on method, which is where you go to knit the stitch, but instead of dropping the stitch, we're casting on a stitch. So you're going to pull through, twist it, and put it on. Okay, let's do another one. So you're going to cast on 2 stitches like this with the knitted cast on technique. And I've got a slower demonstration of this, and I've provided a link in the description field if you want to know how to do the knitted cast on. But here we go. This was our first stitch, and we've cast on 2 stitches. Now we're going to start binding them off. So we're going to knit the first stitch, then we're going to knit the second stitch, and we're going to pass this first stitch over the second stitch that we just knit. So just like a regular bind off, right? So we did that once. We're going to knit the next stitch, and we're going to do that pass over thing again. So that's the second time. And then we're going to knit 1 more stitch here from this needle, and we're going to pass it over a 3rd time. And we form the little picot. Okay, so we do that a total of 3 times. Then you take this stitch, put it back on. So at this point, we should have bound off 1 stitch. For each stitch that we bind off, we get a picot. So let's count and see. We had 12 stitches to begin with, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, which means we've bound off 1 stitch. Now we do the same exact thing again for the second stitch. So we first cast on 2 stitches using the knitted cast on technique. And then we bind off those stitches. So we knit the first one, knit the second one, pass that first one over, knit another stitch, pass it over, and then knit another stitch and pass it over. So 3 passovers. All right, then bring this stitch back, and now we're 1 more stitch down. We're at 10 stitches. So let's do that. We'll have to do that 4 more times because we want to bind off a total of 6 stitches. So we've only bound off 2 stitches right now. We're going to bind off 6 stitches. So we'll do that 4 more times. You'll get to see this beautiful picot edge forming. So here we go. 1, 2, off, 1 more off, and 1 more off. Bring that back, cast on 2 more stitches, 1 and 2. And these stitches just want to get up to the edge of the needle, to the tip of the needle, so just slide them back and knit one, knit the second one, bind hem off, one more, oh, one more, bind hem off, and one more. So that is 4 stitches cast off. Transfer this guy back, we'll do 2 more. And this is our last bind off here in the picot style. And there's a couple different ways of doing a picot edge. This is just one where you cast on, but I like this technique, so that's why I've done it. I've done it this way. And here we go, our last bind off. 1, 2, and one more, 3. And don't forget to bring this back. Okay, so now we've cast off 6 stitches, and for each we've created a nice little picot edge, and we have about 6 stitches remaining, right? So at this point it's just like a wrong side row, so we're facing the wrong side. It's just like a wrong side row. You're going to continue knitting all the way to the last 2 stitches and then do the yarn over. So let's do that. We'll knit through to the last 2 stitches. Okay, then a yarn over and knit 2. So the yarn overs are creating this beautiful edging on this end of the shawl, and the picots are creating the edging on the other end of the shawl. Okay, and that's it. Now you're pretty much going to do the same thing starting on the right side. We're going to keep doing a right side row, wrong side row all the way until we get to 14 stitches. So remember the first time we stopped at till we had 12 stitches. For each section you're going to add on 2 more stitches from where you first started. That's one way of doing it. There's also another way of knowing when to stop by counting the ridges, and I'll show you that as well. But I like numbers, and for me it helps to know, okay, this was 12 stitches, next one is 2 more, so it's 14 stitches. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to go ahead and get myself to that part where I'm just going to keep doing a right side row and a wrong side row and get up to 14 stitches. So let's meet back up there. Okay, so I'm now finished knitting up this second section, and I have 14 stitches on my needle. Okay, and this was the last row that I did was a right side row, and I've just moved this little clippy marker up further up so I can see it. But I'm ready to now do the next level bind off for this second section. So I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing that we did here. We're going to bind off these first 6 stitches in that same picot style, so that then we'll have 8 stitches left on the needle. Okay, so I'll just show you the first couple, and then I'll speed up through the rest. So again, remember the picots, we're adding 2 stitches to that first stitch, and then we're gonna bind off the first one by knitting the first one, knitting the second one, passing it over, bind off the next one, and one more. And all of that is essentially binding off 1 stitch, and bring that stitch back on, and we're going to do it all over again for the second stitch. Now by adding a picot edge to this shawl, we are actually using up more yarn, so keep that in mind. I think you should still be able to get a decent sized shawl from 1 yarn despite adding the picot edge, because that's what I did for mine, and I got almost 80 inches was the length of the shawl. But if it seems like you're not having enough, then you might have to get a second skein, and I know those skeins are huge. So if you get a second skein and only use a little bit of it, then maybe you'll have leftover yarn for making something else, maybe a scarf or a cowl. I've actually even knit socks with that bulky yarn, so I think it's quite versatile to use for different projects. All right, so here you can see I've made 2 picots. So I'm going to go ahead and make the remaining 6 picots. And then I'll show you also how to figure out when to stop by counting the ridges. So let me get to that point and I'll meet you back up there. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I've cast off my, my 6 stitches using the picot bind off, and I have 8 stitches left on the needle. So the way to also know when to stop, and that's the point where you need to bind off the 6 stitches, is by counting the ridges. Now you can clearly see that this section here with these 6 picots, it ended right here. So if you count that as your first ridge, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's the ridge. At that point we've cast off the 6 stitches to make the picot edge. So you can certainly try to do it that way as well by counting the ridges, but I think it's just, for me, it's just easier to just count the number of stitches. And you know you're going to make the picot edges, you're going to do the bind off part when you're facing the wrong side work. And so when you having the stitch marker helps, but if you don't put a stitch marker, then the wrong side work is going to be where the picot edge is on the right side and the yarn over edge is on the left side. So this is the right side of the shawl. So now again, you're at this point, you're going to keep going, we're on the wrong side, so we continue with the wrong side row, a right side row, wrong side row. Keep doing that until we had 12 stitches, 14. So now in the next section you're going to stop at 16 stitches, bind off 6 with the picot, take the remaining 10, build that up to 18 and 20 and 22 and 24. And as you keep doing that, my shawl has fallen down over here, let me pick it up. And so as you keep doing that, your sections are going to keep going up and up and up and up and increasing. So you can see here, each time we've bound off and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's when we bind off. So same thing here. Oh, I think I'm off camera there. So just to show you the ridge method, each time this is where the previous section ends. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You start with the next section again. Here's where the previous ridge ended, or previous section ended. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you can know to bind off that way, or you can know to bind off by counting the numbers and knowing that each section you're just going to keep knitting until you have 2 more stitches than the previous section, and then you do the same thing. So I think I like having the picot edges there because it gives it a little bit something more complicated to do. Otherwise it might end up being a fairly boring project where you just keep knitting and knitting and knitting until it keeps growing. But if you use a yarn like this, the Caron Cakes yarn, you start to get these beautiful stripes. And I had knit this around fall, which is why I really I like this colorway. It reminds me of fall, this cranberry crisp. And so you can certainly choose any color. But if you choose a different yarn with a different thickness, then you may have to adjust your gauge for the needle. I don't know if gauge is super important for this pattern. I think it'll still sort of curl and form it. The only thing is the curl may end up being a little more tighter than it needs to be, and so preferably find a yarn that's about the thickness of this worsted weight medium, and then size 10 needles, which are 6 millimeters, should be fine. So if you've enjoyed the project, I hope you give this one a try. If you have any questions as you work on it, leave me comments in the comments field, ideas, suggestions for videos. Throughout this year, I'm going to do my best to try and post at least 1 video a week. And as always, thank you so much for your support. 2019 was awesome, and I hope 2020 continues to be so. And I hope everyone has a super wonderful year. Oh, and before I forget, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of all my videos. Feel free to share the videos, and as always, if you like the video, click the like button. I love to see those likes. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching. Again, Happy New Year all, and happy knitting.